Now we call our first guest speaker, Mrs. Zohara Meyerhoff Hieronimus. Zohara is an award-winning radio broadcaster, author, social justice, and environmental activist, and pioneer in holistic health care. She is also the founder and executive director of the Hurskamp Mansion Community Health Center, which has since 1984 served East Coast clients with holistic health care services and programs. Zohara received the Garland of Excellence Award in 2005 from Sir Paul McCartney sanctioning charity. The Garland Appeal for hers and Hurskamp 2 decades of service. Zohara has contributed to national publications such as Insight Magazine, Media Bypass, and the Washington Times. Her work with her husband, Dr. Bob Hieronimus, and their media company, Hieronimus Company, has been featured on ABC Radio, CNN, C-SPAN, PBS, The Larry King Show, Strange University, and dozens of leading publications such as the Wall Street Journal, the Washington Post, the New York Times Magazine, and the Baltimore Sun. She has just published the book, Kabbalistic Teachings of the Female Prophets, the 7 Holy Women of Ancient Israel. And she will be speaking to us today about prophecy and world peace, spiritual health, and healing. Please join us in welcoming Zohara Meyerhoff to the podium.
Can you hear me? Oh, this is a broadcaster's dream. A movable mic. Generally, you sit at a chair with a headset on your head, your producer in a room, and all the world is out there listening. Firstly, in listening to your beautiful presentation and yours, and Vanessa, thank you so much for allowing me to share with your community today some of the things I've learned in this godly path of love and teshuvah, which in Judaism is considered a return to God. I want to tell you just a little bit about myself because I don't think many of you know me. Sometimes I'm not sure I know myself, but I think I'm knowing myself better these days. When I was 3 years old, I almost died. And I was drowning. It was my first act of rebellion. I was told by my parents I was in the shallow end of the pool not to go over the step into the deep end, which meant going from this to this. And of course, I was very small, the youngest of my family at the time, and I didn't like being told what I could or couldn't do. So I decided I was going to do it. My big sister could do it. My other sister did it. All the kids around me were swimming. Why couldn't I? So when nobody was looking, what did I do? I chose to step down into the deeper end of the pool. And believe me, I was conscious as a soul that this was a bad decision. I was spinning and spinning and spinning, and I couldn't get my body upright to get to the surface of the water. All of a sudden, this beautiful, beautiful woman stands above the pool in the size of a cloud. And I'm a Jewish person, so I didn't know anything about this amazing being, which I later knew to be the Blessed Mother. And she kept telling me, come to the light, not like in a near-death experience, which I've had, where you literally go through this tunnel and your life flashes before you. She was calling me to this luminous place, which was not a choice of life and death. It was to come to her arms of love. And I did. And so there I am, presumably my body is drowning, my soul is totally at peace in the arms of the Blessed Mother. Later, my own mother comes, pulls me out of the pool and resuscitates me. And this was a story that I kept to myself probably for 30 years until I became a radio broadcaster. And there were always many listeners asking me, well, you talk about all these things about God and reincarnation and laying on of hands and healing at a distance and the connectedness between all life and all of us and all our past lives and all our future lives. Where does that come from? And I said, well, we all speak different languages physically with our mouth through our body, but we all speak the same language of the soul, which is the spirit. Over the years of my work as a broadcast commentator, for 10 years I was required to talk about world affairs, the dark side of life, basically. And when I went into broadcasting, this was after having founded the Ruscombe Mansion Community Health Center in 1984, which is the oldest and I believe still the largest freestanding of its kind in the country. And I did that after my own journey of illness and trying to recover my health from Crohn's disease. And I noticed in Dr. Schwartz's book today, sitting out there on the table, he mentioned this little thing about the vibration of noise to rats created the same conditions that humans experience in ileitis and colitis, inflammatory bowel disease, which is what I suffered from. And interestingly enough, now I spend a good deal of my life in silence, which to my family is very amusing because for 10 years all I did was talk. 3 to 5 hours a day to local and national audiences and sometimes international. I'm telling you this story between the Blessed Mother and broadcasting because I went into radio work after having founded the Ruscombe Mansion Community Health Center, which offers homeopathy and acupuncture and all the gamut that you know of to become now energy medicine and the more solidified arts, whether it's chiropractic or massage or counseling. I felt that I wasn't reaching enough people with this amazing message of healing. What is really healing about? And what is illness? Because I discovered there's a really positive side to disease. That it was really God's way of allowing us to evolve. Because in the tradition I'm a student of, the Hasidic tradition, which is really the mystery tradition of Judaism, what we learn is that the physical world is the bottom of the ladder. When we have a physical ailment, whether it's a simple back pain one day or a chronic ailment in the heart or some other system in the body, it's because it's God's way of giving us an opportunity to do a spiritual root repair. This then brought me to understanding that all the years I spent in covering foreign affairs, I thought you could illuminate the darkness. You know, I was an activist who was given a microphone, and it was just radiantly beautiful to be able to, quote unquote, you know, point out the dark things we were doing to each other, to the environment, to other nations, to our family, to ourselves. After doing that for 10 years, I have what I guess they would say is requisite to find God, a broken heart. Literally, by the end of my 10 years of talking every day on world affairs and good stuff, I talked about angels and near-death experience and those kinds of things all of you are familiar with. I discovered I could say nothing. I thought that there was nothing left to read, nothing left to learn, nothing left to study. I had read maybe 8,000 books, interviewed the who's who of the world in New Paradigm Consciousness and the spiritual paths, interviewed great healers, shamans, priests, imams, rabbis. For 88 days, every time I closed my eyes, I was in the ocean, in like the mystic sea, all by myself in this little tiny rowboat, and I couldn't get it to stop, whether I was awake or I was asleep. Finally, on the 88th day of this experience, it was like a roulette wheel. It stopped. And when it stopped, the message I got inside was, you need to study Kabbalah. I had started studying Kabbalah, which means the received tradition in Judaism, as a very young girl. But growing up in the family and in the community and the civilization we do, as a Reformed Jewish woman, I would go to the rabbi and say, I want to talk to you about the angel I talked to last night. I want to tell you about my last life. I want to talk to you maybe about my future life. And of course, no matter what, or this was a good one, I want to talk about resurrection. Well, all of these were concepts that the rabbi said are not part of Judaism. I didn't believe that. My soul didn't believe that. I couldn't hear that that was true. It wasn't true for me. However, like many people growing up in a particular spiritual tradition, which may not really bring you to the love of God through your heart, but only through the analysis of the teachings of God through his teachers, through the head, the intellect, many of us went and searched out other paths, whether it was Amerindiaism or shamanism or Hinduism or Buddhism. And I was one of those people. I studied the 10,000 things, and I studied the Western mystery traditions, Rosicrucianism, whether theosophy, anthroposophy, these are all sciences of the Western mystery tradition trying to do the same thing all of you are involved in, and they've been doing it for centuries. In 2004, At this time of the year, I was in my sukkah. The sukkah, you may have seen them in the Jewish tradition. It explores the way in which all of the Israelites were protected by the hovering cloud of glory. So when we make these sukkahs, which are booths for the Harvest Festival, you're supposed to go in and inhabit them. You're supposed to go live in them, sleep in them, eat in them. And it was the first night of Sukkot in 2004, and I had one of these blessed moments in life, which if you're lucky enough to have had or will have, I can tell you, confirms for you that you are an eternal being with all these other eternal beings, having a little minor experience in a body in order to elevate the entire world, in order to repair the world, to spiritualize the world, to make matter aware through our consciousness, meaning that we are co-creators. As you expressed the pieces within, that was what I found. After 10 years of covering the world, thinking you could illuminate the darkness, I discovered you don't illuminate darkness. Dark is dark, and there's a purpose for it, and God gives us evil. And a Yetzer Hara, our animal or evil inclination, so that our soul will get strengthened. Our Yetzer Tov, our soul, our good inclination, will choose good. So in Kabbalah, it's taught that God deliberately allows evil in the world so that we might become co-creators, so that we might become godlike, that we are made in God's image. Kabbalah is a beautiful, holy art. It's a science, it's not really a philosophy, and the entire purpose of being a student in this mystery tradition of Kabbalah is self-refinement, self-management. It's described as being the model of the creation of the world. I didn't bring any slides. I used to do PowerPoint, and I found that I got all caught up in that, and I couldn't ever, detour to something that Holy Spirit might bring you to. Back for a moment to the Sukkah, what I experienced was the Holy Spirit. What we call in Judaism the Ruach HaKodesh, the Holy Spirit. And it's a level of prophecy, not the highest, but one every one of us, every person in the world can still attain. And what this Holy Spirit showed me in a moment's flash was, I had been asking this question. I'd studied all this different paranormal phenomena and remote viewing and laying on of hands and distant healing and magnetic passes and all the things you all study. And I noticed that in Judaism, there were 48 prophets plus Moses, that's 49, but there were only 7 female prophets. And my little feminine mind is going, 7-to-1 ratio, that's really interesting. So I got very kind of awestruck by this notion that within my own faith, that perhaps I hadn't been educated properly from a spiritual perspective, but much more of sort of a ritual and year process. I was really interested. Is there really a paranormal phenomena that is a record of prophecy? And I went to find it, and there is. It's said that, firstly, and I'll come back to the Sukkah, because we're here at that time of year again, and just again this year I had another amazing experience. So what we were shown, or what I was shown, was that the 7 prophetesses, I asked myself, if God does everything with purpose, why only 7 prophetesses? In the tree of life, which is composed of 10 spheres, called sephirot, or luminous emanations, and they are fields of radiance that the Creator fills. I didn't bring a diagram. I'm thinking now maybe I could take some balloons and sort of show you, but I don't know if they're going to pop. Do any of you know what the tree of life looks like in Kabbalah? It has a sphere at the, here, easy, Zohara, think. It's your body. There's a head, and that's Keter, the crown, and then on the right side there's another ball, and on the left side parallel to it another, and that's called the intellect. It's a triad. In that particular arena of our intellect, our ability to sense and reason, are our 7 gateways, our faculties, our ears, our eyes, our nose, and our mouth. And when you count them, that's 7. It's also the 7 days of creation, the 7 days of the week. There's a lot of things about it that we're not going to get to today. Below those 3 at the top are 7 more that correspond to the structure of our body. There's one here that falls at the right arm called chesed, loving kindness. There's one on the left arm called gevura, which is judgment or discernment, or courage to change mostly. There's one in the middle called tiferet, which means beauty, truth, or harmony. And its purpose, like anything you can see, is when something's in the middle, like of our body and our torso as an example, it connects our right and our left arm, our head, our right and our left leg. And in our right leg in Kabbalah, that's our will, our ability to attach to the Creator, to experience eternity in everything we do. When we have will to follow our word, we're doing what we're expected to do. Don't say something and not do it. And your left leg is humility. And then your generative organs is yesod, or our covenant with the Creator, meaning to make life is being God. So that when we enjoy the pleasure of making love, that's also an expression of the Creator's love of us. So when it's abused, it's a diminution of the light that's actually possible for a human to experience. And finally, our feet, which is malchut, and it represents the sovereign world. Now, I've given you a lot of terms, and I don't want to spend a whole lot of time on that, other than to tell you, it's a structure of the human body. And because today part of what we're speaking of is healing, it tells us when something is in disrepair in the physical world, whether it's the state of a society or the state of a household or the state of our body, it's an opportunity to elevate it. So for instance, as an example, let's say I had broken my right wrist and I have to heal it. Well, you do all the normal things that you do for a body, but I would also like to think that God has given me the tools for my refinement and my repair. On the tree of life, that would be represented by loving kindness. And so I would have to look at myself and say, have I been loving enough? Am I using my right hand in a kind way? Is my heart really expressing that love? So in the book that I've written, The Kabbalistic Teachings of the Female Prophets, it goes into great detail about the 7 prophetesses and what they teach us, as well as the Sephirot and how they become tools for revelation. Prophecy, it's said in our tradition, was given and is given for very explicit reasons. One, to bring the people back to God. That's its primary purpose. The second is to avoid natural disaster. And the third, national peril. It's also said that a person does not receive prophecy unless their community is also worthy of it. So there could be 10 of you right here who are very worthy of receiving this very high-level revelation. And if our community as a whole is not willing, God may not put that revelation through you. You're also told that if you're given one of these revelations, well, that gets too complicated. But let me come back to another thing. So the purpose of prophecy then historically for the Jewish people was to return to God, avoid natural disaster, national peril. The prophets would generally go outside of their community into the woods or the rivers, uncontaminated by the vibration and the frequency of not only, in our case, technology of our civilized world, but the disharmonious thoughts and feelings of the people in the community. Because we know everything is vibration. So the greatest way for the prophet to conceal them, to protect rather, their vessel, was to isolate themselves in nature. This does not mean a life isolated from community. It's explicitly to go do that in order to come back to community, which is how I think all sacred societies work when you go on a spiritual mission. The prophetesses, however, what I was shown in my sukkah, really represented 7 stages of development that our own body represents and that all of the world will go through. The first was Sarah. Sarah was the mother of the Israelites, and it teaches us that the seed of life is love. Just as we were told, love is the key. Love is God. God is love. After Sarah, we have Miriam. Miriam brought the Jewish people to deliverance. It says that after we create something, we have to deliver it. When a woman gives birth, she goes through these long contractions that are very painful. I can vouch for that. But that's what deliverance is. Deliverance is you sort what's good, what's bad. What do you need, what don't you need? And then you give birth to something. But after you've done that, first your seed, whether it's an idea, you're creating an idea, or changing something about yourself, or you want to go out and start your own peace movement to make it bigger, you have to decide what's useful and what's not. Then after that, you come down to the torso where your heart is housed. And what's in our torso? Well, obviously our heart. And our job as humans, when we do something, when we create something and we discern what do we keep, what do we give up, is to elevate all the parts. Which means if it's in your household, to elevate your children to their greatest potential, to elevate your husband, or if it's your wife, to elevate the people you work with, to elevate the person at the grocery store. Our purpose as being the middle pillar of God's work, that's the way I think of it, we're the vertical beings, is to elevate everything and to harmonize it. It is said that when God created the world, he was very concerned about what vessel would hold the blessings he wanted to give Israel. And it said the only vessel that he could create to contain those blessings, rather the vessel to contain those blessings, was peace. Shalom. And shalom, we find, begins in the heart. It says that I am not born for myself, I am born for the world. So that when we, as we were wisely instructed, do something with loving kindness, it's not only a repair of that moment with that person, but it's also an elevation in the spiritual worlds. So if we're in the physical world, the last rung of this entire spiritual ladder, any good thing we do in this world brings down greater light and blessing from the higher world, because we're creating a vessel and an opportunity for it to happen. How you could go from 30 people to 50,000, because it unleashes, I think, in the other person an opportunity to be loved. Respecting somebody is really creating the opportunity to love them. So here in the middle then is this elevation of all the parts, whether it's your right hand and your left hand to harmonious action. Like when we give to somebody, it said we use both our hands. What does that really mean? It means we use our loving kindness. We use our discernment. When do I give? How much do I give? How do I give? And then we make it beautiful. Beauty is a combination of opposites sometimes, of polarities. And we see that in truth too. When you hear truth, you know that it's inclusive of all things, which is why when you hear peace begins within, everybody goes, yeah, because it's the truth. I mean, the outer world just reflects the inner state of all of us. When I was a broadcaster, and every once in a while I myself would fall into that trap of whether it was a Saddam Hussein or one of our other CIA-held puppets. I shouldn't go that direction, but nonetheless. And I would say, oh, you know, it's them, it's the other, it's out there, until finally I said one day on the air, I went, oh my God, you know, have I ever acted like a terrorist? And I have. I've had anger out of control in different stages of my moment when I wasn't in control. It was a long time ago when I was a kid, but even so, still I'll get angry and nothing comes out of my mouth, thank God. I've been able to manage what I say. I don't do anything with my anger. I stand really still until I can recover my balance, but it still tells me I have a lot of work to do. So if I'm still capable of feeling anger about something rather than love, no wonder there's war and disharmony. So I agree entirely that, and that's why I left broadcasting and foreign affairs and came and did the work that I felt needed to be done for my own participation in a community that showed us what was good about us, that gave us the tools we have in order not just to be enlightened, but to be part of the enlightenment. Take vitamin D, by the way. It's said that it manages our digestion of light. When you, and I don't want to go through all of it in a long way, let me just say, after Sarah and the seed, and Miriam and deliverance and judgment, and then Devorah, who was the judge, who taught us moral order and beauty, and she, by the way, was the only judge that judged. Not only was she a prophetess and the only one in that time period, but she was also the only judge that judged. And they say because women have a closer connection to the Creator. Women are born with extra bina. What they mean by that is understanding. And men have extra wisdom, and the balance between the two of them create great knowledge in the family and in the community. So anyway, Devorah then brought the people moral order. So it's telling us that first we create something, then we discern what to keep, what to get rid of, then we make it beautiful. These are also days of the week. Sunday's creation, Monday is judgment, Tuesday is beauty. These are ways you can actually take these qualities of luminous emanations from God and apply them even at the right moment in time in your life. After Devorah, Hannah came. Some of you may remember Hannah prayed and prayed and prayed for a child. Finally she did. She had Samuel, the prophet, and 4 other children as well. But she taught the Jewish people all about prayer. How do we go about praying properly? And what that is Netzach, the right leg is your will. Most of us are right-handed. Our right legs tend to be stronger. We stand on it. It gives us the ability to stay and go. And that's what she taught us. You have to attach yourself to God. So you've done something. You create your house, your relationship, your family, whatever. Then you decide what to keep, what not. Then you beautify it, you elevate it, you balance it. Then you got to get out and do it, whatever that it is. If you had an idea, you go do it, and you take it to town, so to speak. But the balance to that will and attachment to the Creator is humility. The left leg, because the prophetess Abigail showed us that she was willing to risk her life to make peace. It tells us then that humility is the key to peacemaking in the world. It's not, oh, I have an idea. Oh, why don't we do it this way? Or let's all sit down and carve up nations and assets and distribute them evenly. No, it's really about humility. What does the divine will of God want? And that's true in our own lives. So after we've created something, made it beautiful, gone out to do it, then we have to surrender it. Give it up to God. When you don't know, ask. Then we come down to yesod, which is the covenant. And for the Jewish people, it's the brit of the phallus for the male on the 8th day of life. But for all of us, we're incumbent is to have the brit of the heart, which means to take off the hard casing around our heart. And this is our covenant with God. It's telling us that once we strip away the hardness and the ego and the arrogance, we really do reach an amazing spiritual state of potential revelation. Because finally, when you come down to the feet, you often think of this as the bottom. Don't put your feet in the furniture. Your feet are dirty. Boy, your feet smell. They're very holy because it represents not only your will to go and do and follow through, but also your speech, interestingly enough, that the head and the feet are connected like when you're in an embryonic state. But why I wrote the book on the Kabbalistic teachings of the female prophets and came to appreciate that these 7 prophetesses teach us this development of, first, that the seed of life is love, then we have to have judgment. That means separating yourself from what's unholy in yourself. It's not out there, it's in here. The greatest war any of us have to fight is right in here. God willing, there won't be many more armaments we have to use other than our determination and our love. Then there's moral order, and this reflects then what the whole world is going through. And then after moral order, there's spiritual order. And after spiritual order, there's a royal bloodline. That's Abigail. She gave birth to one of King David's children. And it tells us that we're all inheritors of the royal bloodline, that we are all part of royalty. Then there is, when Huldah came, Yesod I talked about as the generative organ, she was the prophetess that helped the king return to Judaism. He did teshuvah, repentance, brought all the Jewish people back to ritual and to a love of God. But she explicitly revealed to us the world to come, that there is an afterlife. And it said that our word, our thought, our speech, and our action, or our thought, speech, and action, to simplify it, are the garments of the soul in the afterlife. And I remember the first time I heard that, I was thinking, wow, what's my coat going to look like? Because then all of a sudden, it's not just theory anymore. It's explicit that what you think, say, and do really is your inheritance in the world to come. And then finally is the kingdom and the sovereignty, which Queen Esther teaches us and our feet teach us. So if you ever have foot pain, besides doing the logical thing of, are your shoes good? Are you resting? Is simply to ask yourself, do I use everything I have? Close. I don't know what time we started, but it's made of some beautiful Hebrew letters, and one of them is the shin, which is fire. And the end of the word is a mem, which is water. And I thought that really interesting, that fire and water and peace. Well, fire is often thought of as our intellect, and water is our emotions. And so it's telling us that our intellect and our emotions, when devoted to the teachings and connected to the teachings of God, Lamed is often thought of as the high letter, and it teaches, and it's a connection, is that when we connect our intellect, that top, and all of our emotions, and we refine them and get control of our Yetzer Hara, our inclination that's selfish, versus our Yetzer Tov, our soulful inclination that wants to do good, we become masters of our own kingdom. And that's why one of the teachings in Judaism is if you save a single life, it's as if you save the whole world, because anytime you do something down here, there's a reflection in the spiritual world. So that we all then obviously become co-creators. And that was why I wrote the book. I went in search of prophecy and couldn't find any good books, really. I went in search of the 7 prophetesses, and I couldn't find anything. And what I discovered in doing the work itself was that God gave us eyes, ears, nose, mouth, hands, feet, all these beautiful organs, so that we might elevate the soul. We always sometimes think about the soul elevating the body. The soul's already a perfectly spiritual being, but when you think about eternity, we talked about that very briefly, when we die, and we put on the garments of the afterlife. There is a stage which taught, I think, in all traditions of resurrection. And what does it mean? It means that eventually we can have an eternal body with an eternal soul. Not everybody thinks that's such a great idea, but I happen to think that's how it's designed. And so in closing, the combination of all the different things I've done in my life, whether it's setting up a healthcare center so that people could get better, or studying prophecy, or studying paranormal phenomena, and I've certainly been involved in many of the things you all practice. And by the way, the Rosicrucians have beautiful teachings on spiritual healing and passes, positive and negatives, was to finally, in my own life, become what I saw, which was at peace. You know, I found that my greatest challenge was myself. You know, the greatest contribution I could make in the world was to say, yeah, I don't have anger anymore. Yes, I can love that person and this opportunity and this moment. And when we do that, we really get the emanations from God. It's, I mean, and some people say, well, it's very selfish once you figure it all out. You know, it's great to do good. You feel good. Yeah, more light comes from the soul, and it's true. It makes you healthy. But that's not why we do it. The ultimate reason we do it is because we're designed to do it. Not to do it goes against our basic nature, our true godly divinity, which is that we are here to help each other, to love each other, take care of our communities, and each of us has a part in it, and nobody can replace us, and that it's not really about out there. It's really all about in here. So I want to thank you for letting me be in here today and for the opportunity. And I want to say that Vanessa and the Spiritist organization was at my center for a number of years, and we had the pleasure of supporting your efforts. And I think it was in complete harmony with our own work, which basically shows us that there is really only one path, and that's peace. And so may we all find that peace, and God bless you all.